Hey, I'm DaShawn Jones, and you're watching Crimson Drive by NASCAR.
Greetings from Daytona, where a band of dreamers took a strip of beach and turned it into a proving ground. The great American race, where year after year, greatness is the destination. So book your experience and soak in 500 miles of history and tradition. Once you arrive, you'll never look back. Secure your seats now at Daytona500.com.
Roll Tide and welcome to this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover. Great to be with you from our studios in Tuscaloosa before a very busy weekend of Alabama athletics. We'll begin our show by taking a look at what's coming up and our headlines thanks to our friends RJ Young. RJ Young is the official technology solutions provider of Crimson Drive. They've given us a smart board to go through everything in a very interactive way, starting with what's on the show. We'll be talking first with DaShawn Jones, one of the outstanding defensive backs for the Crimson Tide. He'll talk about his transition to Alabama from Wake Forest. Then we'll get thoughts from Charlie Potter at Bama Online, not just about Alabama football, but men's basketball as well, plus what's ahead for the Crimson Tide football team, hopefully in a race to the college football playoff. This week's opponent, the Mercer Bears, will check in with their radio broadcaster Rick Cameron for the other booth presented by Marathon. And then last but not least, we'll hear from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Kalen DeBoer, with his final word from last night's edition of Hey Coach and the Kalen DeBoer Show. Looking at our headlines for today, focus first on football. The Crimson Tide, after last week's win against LSU, now home against the Mercer Bears coming up on Saturday for the final non-conference game of the season. Kickoff set for 1 o'clock. Our airtime will be 10 a.m. from outside at Vector Security Champions Lane to begin the broadcast. Hopefully, you can join us starting at 10 a.m. for all of our coverage. Alabama 4-0 all-time against Mercer, including a win a couple years ago, so hoping to keep it rolling this Saturday. And then the week after that, we're going to be in Norman, Oklahoma, and we know it will be under the lights against the Oklahoma Sooners starting at 6:30 p.m. with radio start time at 3:30. For the Crimson Tide men's basketball team, it's been a fun start to the season for Nate Oates and the second-ranked team in the country, off to a perfect start already this year with wins over UNC Asheville, Arkansas State, and on Monday, McNeese. Now coming up on Friday, the toughest challenge of the year so far at number 12 Purdue. 6 p.m. will be the tip-off at Mackey Arena. Our radio coverage will start at 5 o'clock from Mackey. We can't wait to be in West Lafayette, Indiana for the Crimson Tide against the Purdue Boilermakers. Last year, these teams did meet. Of course, it was Purdue coming from behind to win 92-86. That game was played in Toronto in December of last year for Toronto native Zach Edey, who scored 35 points for Purdue, but he's now moved on to the National Basketball Association. So Crimson Tide, Mark Sears also had 35 points. He is still the Crimson Tide, so we look forward to that coming up for men's basketball. How about for women's basketball? 4-0 start to the year as the Crimson Tide are now ranked number 22 in the nation. Last night had some tough moments against Norfolk State, but the Crimson Tide were able to persevere even after it became a one-point game, rolled to the 10-point win. 68-58 was the final score. Tonight, the women's basketball team back in action, home against Alcorn State starting at 6 p.m. Our radio coverage will start at 5:45 from Coleman, and then coming up on Sunday, it's a road trip for the Crimson Tide to take on ULM. Warhawks and the Crimson Tide will get going at 2 o'clock, and we'll have the broadcast for you on the network as well. Coming up on Saturday, we'll have a good time with Smith Distillery on stage at Vector Security Champions Lane. It is the best pregame fan fest in the country. Actually, everything will open up starting at 9 o'clock. We're going to have a really good time with the Legends Lounge Beer Garden available. The LED screens will be showing College Game Day and then the early window of games before. Alabama takes on Mercer at 1 o'clock. There are interactive displays, autograph signings, food trucks, really everything going on at Vector Security Champions Lane. And don't forget about the concert coming up from Smith Distillery all around our radio pregame show that will start at 10 p.m. at Vector Security Champions Lane. One of the key players for the Crimson Tide in the win this past week against LSU was defensive back DaShawn Jones. He joins us as our one-on-one conversation of the week to talk about his journey to Alabama from Wake Forest and what's ahead for the Crimson Tide. Roll Tide and welcome back to Saban Field at Bryant-Denny Stadium and this episode of Crimson Drive driven by NASCAR. This is Roger Hoover. Now, please be joined in our podcast studio at the Advantage Center by Alabama defensive back DaShawn Jones, fresh off the win for Alabama against LSU. DaShawn, Roll Tide. How special was Saturday in Baton Rouge?
It was very special. It was a great experience. My first time playing there, so every opportunity that I got, I made sure I gave it my all.
How'd this team really get ready for that ball game using the open date and then everything in your week of preparation? Did you have a good feeling going to that game?
Yeah, we definitely had a good feeling during this game. We know we had to come in and do what we had to do. So it was definitely a great preparation week for us. And just leading up to that week, it was just amazing. Like practices was amazing, good tempo, good energy, everything was good.
What a great night for the Alabama defense. You included with a key stop. What can you tell us about the tackle for a loss you had against the Tigers?
During that moment, my number was called, and I was ready for the moment. I made a good play, great tackle for loss. I was excited. I seen myself celebrate with Jahad Campbell, so it was just an exciting moment for one of my plays in my career.
I mean, overall, you got to be really proud of the defense's performance, keeping them out of the end zone until the very last moment. But I mean, to do that against an LSU offense that put up a lot of points against a lot of SEC teams, what does that mean for this defense?
It means a lot. It shows that we are competitive. What we really want, what we really competing for. We had to make this game a staple for what we want in the long run. So.
How much fun have you had just being an Alabama football player? This your first year with us, transferring in from Wake Forest.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun actually. I had a lot of fun. I came in, the guys embraced me. It felt like I was here for all 4 years already. So, just making that transition, it was smooth, pretty easy. And the competition, I love it. So that's what I came here for.
Yeah, what stood out about Alabama? Because I'm sure you had a lot of different opportunities once you put your name in the transfer portal. But what made this the right place for you?
It's everything you want. It's competition. Is NFL level competition. It's everything you can ever ask for. Competition, like I said, and then just the facilities. The facilities played a big role. The body health. Like the whole nutrition. That's what I would say. The nutrition rooms and everything that revolves in that made it an easy decision for me, and I knew right away I wanted to be there.
How about playing for your safeties coach or defensive back coach, Coach Linguist?
I love him. That's my dog. I love him a lot. That's my guy.
How does he keep you guys motivated? And it seems like a pretty competitive group too.
Yeah. During the week we take preparation steps. We watch extra film. Like Sundays and Mondays we watch those clips of the teams that we're playing on Saturday. And he makes it easier. He makes it easier. He slows the game down for the corners, as a defense as a whole. And yeah, like I said, building up to that Saturday, he makes the game is a slow build up. So he makes it pretty easy for us.
And also, one of the captains of this team is one of your teammates in that secondary, Malachi Moore. How have you seen him be a leader for you guys this year?
I like Malachi Moore. He's definitely a good brother to me, and he's a good brother and teammate to the team. He's a person that knows the standard. He's been through it, and he tries to uplift us and help us bring that same type of standard to the new era. So I like that about Malachi.
Was player leadership really important after some of the adversity we had in the last month with the losses to Vanderbilt and Tennessee?
Yeah, yes, it was. I think that played a big role in what we have to accomplish. Yeah.
And since then, we've seen Alabama post wins against Missouri, post wins against LSU. What's going to be most important coming up in this 3-game stretch to really finish the season the right way?
We just got to know that we can't get complacent anymore. I feel like we got a little complacent after, but it's just we can't get complacency. We can't have that in the building. So for us to do what we have to do, we have to take each game and go 1-0.
Tell us about DaShawn away from the football field. What's been your focus in the classroom? What do you think you may want to do after football?
I really want to go into real estate. I had a cousin that he unfortunately passed away, but he was into real estate and his business is still growing. So he kind of led me into that direction, to go in the real estate world, commercial real estate. And yeah, that's pretty much what I want to do after football. But I'm just a chill guy, honestly. I'm a chill guy, quiet guy. I don't really talk as much, but the guys love me, and I love the guys back. So
that's outstanding. Well, we're thrilled you're wearing crimson now instead of black and gold. Just thank you so much for all the time you've given us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Experience racing like never before. From the sandy beaches of Daytona to the high banks of one of the most exciting super speedways on the NASCAR circuit. Don't miss out as NASCAR kicks off the 2025 season with the Daytona 500 on February 16th, 2025. Witness history in the making and purchase your tickets today at DaytonaInternationalSpeedway.com. Fun conversation with DaShawn Jones, and if you missed it earlier in the week, we also had a conversation with freshman defensive back Dre Kirkpatrick Jr. Now, we talk to the media, and we always like catching up with Charlie Potter, who does a great job covering all things Crimson Tide for Bama Online. He joins us to give us perspective not just on the Crimson Tide football team, but also what he's seen so far from men's basketball in its first week of the season. Here's our conversation with Charlie Potter.
Charlie, everyone around this football program in a pretty good mood after the LSU win. Just what were your main takeaways from Saturday in Death Valley?
Yeah, it was a really impressive showing. Coming off the bye week, Alabama had a really good game against Missouri, but I think everybody noticed that Missouri was pretty banged up going into that game. But LSU, I mean, it was a must-win game for both teams, basically a playoff elimination game. And I mean, Alabama really took care of business. You could tell from the opening jump. Well, I wouldn't say that. The first play was a false start, but beyond that, it was smooth sailing for that offense, for the defense. Really, they had big plays. They gave up some chunk yards, but then they kind of really locked in near the goal line and had some big stops, held them to field goals early. Really, the only touchdown of the game came when the twos were in. So the defense got more turnovers. They were able to apply pressure on Garrett Nussmeier. Offensively, Jalen had just a tremendous game with his legs, 185 yards on the ground, 4 more touchdowns against LSU. That's 2 years in a row. And then they really played complementary football. When they got the turnovers, they were able to score points off of them, 21 off of the 3 turnovers. So it was really just an all-around performance by Alabama and an impressive one, to say the least. I mean, you had to get the win to stay in playoff contention, but to do so by making a statement, I think impressed a lot of people. And now, I mean, heck, the narrative a month ago has completely changed, flipped to where Alabama's right there in the playoff hunt and maybe even could get to Atlanta and to play in the SEC championship game.
Looking back at the last 2 wins, what do you feel like are some areas Alabama really cleaned up from what was a really tough 3-game stretch from Vanderbilt, South Carolina, and Tennessee? Kind of where is this team now compared to where they were about a few weeks ago?
I think the defense has steadily improved since that Vanderbilt game. I think they've been a lot better on third down. That was obviously the bugaboo in Nashville. But I think offensively, the last 2 weeks they've been able to run the ball effectively, and I think that's made a huge difference. Against Missouri, they had, I think, over 270 yards. You saw the running backs get more involved. Obviously at LSU, what Jalen was able to do with his legs, but collectively they rushed for over 300 yards and 6 touchdowns. So I think that's been something that fans have wanted to see, is just more balance offensively and the ability to run the ball, because when you're able to sustain those drives on the ground, and then obviously what Jalen can do with his arm and with the receivers that they have, to be able to have that balanced approach, I think has been something that's been lacking or maybe not as consistent. And so to see that, I think has been a positive development. I think, again, defensively, they've just been on this positive trajectory really since the beginning of October after a bad performance. And I think they've been really, really good. Again, third down, turnovers. I think in the last 4 games, they have 13. So they've been opportunistic on that side of the ball. It's really, I think both sides of the football are trending up. But I think really with these last 2 games, the biggest takeaway is Alabama's been able to run the ball kind of like they want to. And I think that can only mean good things for this offense.
Yeah, and how special is this offense when Jalen Milroe is able to run like he did against LSU? I mean, his first step was so good. He's able to get 4 touchdowns, and he just made it look easy a lot on Saturday.
He really did. And I don't know if it's just an LSU thing, because he's had 2 huge games against them now in back-to-back years. But I do think that Nick Sheridan in this offense really schemed some things up for him. I thought the running backs did a great job just in terms of almost being lead blockers on some of those plays. But it does so much for the offense, because they weren't there necessarily in the LSU game. But there were a couple of those deep shots that like Alabama was about to hit those. And I mean, you were there. It was raining in Baton Rouge. And I think had it not been, pouring at some point in the game, that maybe Ryan Williams hauls in that deep shot, because that's another strength of Jalen Milroe. I think that opens some things up in the passing game, just because you have to, put more players in the box. You have to give more attention to Jalen Sutton to run the football. So I think it's just another dimension to this offense. And I think you can look at it as sure, maybe that takes away some things from the receivers in the passing game. I think it opens some things up because it keeps the defense honest. So I think if it wasn't raining, if the weather wasn't a factor in LSU, maybe some of those deep shots are hitting. I think Jalen was just 0 for 2 for shots down the field, so not just a huge sample size there, but I think it does wonders for this offense and makes him arguably the most dangerous player in college football when he's playing like he did on Saturday.
Defensively, a good performance for Alabama, but it was a costly game for the Tide defense, losing Q Robinson for the rest of the year with injury. Kind of where does Alabama go with that spot? Also considering Keanu Coote will be unavailable for this game against Mercer.
Yeah, I mean, to put it bluntly, Roger, it sucks to see that happen to Q because he's a guy that's put in a lot of work. He's been in this program for 5 years. He waited his turn behind some stellar athletes and Will Anderson, Dallas Turner, Chris Brassel, and he's been playing really well. He's tied for the team lead in sacks with 4. He's been able to get a lot of pressure. He's probably been Alabama's most consistent pass rusher, honestly, up to this point in the season. And to see him go down like that in a game when he was playing well, again, it's tough to see because just what he's done to get to this point and what he's kind of poured into this program, I think he'll continue to be kind of a leader and coach for those younger guys. But it's going to be some young guys that step up because you mentioned they're shorthanded already. Quay Russal's played a ton at that Wolf linebacker position. I think he's going to be the number one guy moving forward, but they're going to need some things out of a guy like Yanze Pierre, who was in the same boat as Quay last year, didn't play. But he's seen his snaps kind of increase over the course of the season, has shown some bright spots here and there. But I also think they could get a little creative. You could see Jahad Campbell maybe play more off the edge. That's something he did in high school. It's something he's done throughout his career. And the fact that you have Deontay Lawson and Justin Jefferson to maybe play those off-ball linebacker positions to give Jahad the ability to rush the passer, I think is beneficial because Jahad did a great job of that in the LSU game. I think he had a sack and a half. Probably could have had more. He played just unbelievably in Baton Rouge. So that's probably where you turn right now. I mean, they can always mix some things up and you'll play more 2 bandits. We've seen that some this season, but a huge loss, not only just for what they do on the field, but just from a leadership standpoint and losing a guy that's just been great for the program. And honestly, from a media standpoint, great to deal with too.
Speaking of the media, this is a week everybody would be kind of on edge for those Coach Saban press conferences before a non-conference game in November. Just curious, getting to cover Kalen DeBoer in his first year, just how have you seen his approach to the media especially and kind of what you guys are able to cover compared to the Saban era?
Yeah, I mean, I think on Monday he was even asked about the backup quarterbacks and didn't have a fiery rant. So that's a huge difference right there. But no, I've enjoyed covering Kalen. He's been a lot of fun to deal with. He's very personable. And I think that's not a knock on Nick Saban by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just they're different personalities. And so he's been great from that standpoint. He's been really good to me, good to a lot of guys in that room. And I think you can tell just the way he is in front of us, it isn't a show because the guys speak up for that. Everybody in the building speaks up for that. So it's been good. It's been positive. It's been a lot more laid back. But yeah, this week I don't expect any kind of rants or any kind of viral moments from Kalen DeBoer when he's talking to the media.
Well, Alabama basketball is off and running, Charlie, as you well know. 3-0 to start the season. Got the Purdue game coming up on Friday, but what are your takeaways from getting to see this team in person and on the floor for the first time this year?
They're super talented. I think the ceiling and the sky's the limit for this team. But they've been tested. I mean, I think we all know how Nate Oates likes to schedule opponents. He likes to be exposed this earlier in the season, and they played some really good mid-major teams. I mean, McNeese won 30 games last year. That's not a fluke, and Will Wade's a good coach. He brought in some good talent. They really tested Alabama, and I think that's exactly what Nate Oates wants. He wants to be exposed this early in the season to be able to tell these guys who have heard all offseason long how good they are, preseason number 1, can't compete for a national championship, that, hey, we still have things to work on. And so I think that it's beneficial to get the win, but to do so by maybe, 8 points on Monday night. It's a game where you don't blow out a team that maybe people expect you to blow out. And so I think that there's plenty that they can work on. I think rebounding offensively is something that they want to clean up. They obviously haven't shot the ball just great in these last couple of games, but again, they're playing really good mid-major teams. Arkansas State, led by Brian Hodgson, that's a good team that's going to potentially push for a spot in the NCAA tournament. So they've got some tough ones coming up, no doubt. I think we'll learn a lot about Alabama, but that's exactly what Nate Oates wants. And going on the road, we'll see how this kind of young team, or at least a new look team, can respond. I think they have the ability to beat anybody in the country. But Nate Oates made the good point on Monday is you can't just show up. You have to put in the work and you have to do the things that are necessary to win. I think he was disappointed. I think they got beat in the blue collar points against McNeese State. That's not something you typically hear from a Nate Oates team. So plenty to clean up, but I think plenty to be encouraged about as well. Mark Sears is still Mark Sears. You see Grant Nelson and Latrell Reitzel knocking off some of the rust that they had from missing some parts of the preseason, and some of these new guys are meshing in well. So they've been a lot of fun to watch, and I think that's going to continue to be the case here moving forward.
Fun time of the year, basketball and football in full swing. We'll be checking out your work, Charlie, on Bama Online all throughout to keep us up to date on the Crimson Tide. Just thank you for the time you've given us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network.
Yeah, no problem, Roger. Thanks for having me.
Greetings from Daytona, where year after year, greatness is the destination. So book your experience and soak in 500 miles of history and tradition. Secure your seats now at Daytona500.com.
From the press box, we go down the hall to the other booth, to the visiting radio booth at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and check in with Rick Cameron, the longtime voice of the Mercer Bears. He joins us to talk about a team that has already won at least a share of a championship this season. That's Alabama's opponent for this week, the Mercer Bears out of the Southern Conference. Here's the other booth, presented by Marathon.
Rick, it's good to see you again. It's been a couple years since we last had the Bears here in Tuscaloosa, but how's everything going for you guys?
Doing good, Roger. Again, good to see you as well. I think this will be our third trip to Tuscaloosa. It's always a fun time when we make the trip over. I think I've shared with you in the past, I lived in the state of Alabama for 8 years, many years ago. Got a lot of friends over there, and we always look forward to coming to Tuscaloosa to play you guys.
Well, we'll look forward to it. And this year, taking on a Mercer team that seems to be, Rick, really riding high with a 9-1 record, 6-1 in the SoCon. Just tell us about the journey this team's been on throughout the year.
Well, to set the stage, Roger, I think it starts with the head coach. Mike Jacobs come in as our first-year head coach, came to us from Lenore Ryan. Interestingly, as the season began, of the top coaches percentage-wise in winning, Kalen DeBoer was number 1. Mike Jacobs was number 6. So he came to us with a winning percentage. He was in college an offensive lineman at Ohio State. He has brought a leadership that has the team bought in and really has talked a lot about complementary football. And by that, the offense, the defense, special teams, whatever it takes to provide the win on any particular game. We knew coming into the season, we had a lot of veteran defensive players back. Offensively, we didn't really know. We needed a new quarterback, running backs, receivers. The defense has really stepped up, Roger. They have played tremendously. They got their first shutout last week, but that was the 5th time they have held an opponent to 7 points or less. In the LCS statistics, they're first in like 6 categories, including third down defense, interceptions, and those kind of key categories. The special teams in this complementary football mode have stepped up. We blocked punts for touchdowns. We actually have found ways to score on days when maybe the offense had not given us a chance to take the lead. We've had excellent special teams play. Braden Smith, our punt returner and kick returner, has had several punts for touchdowns. We've had some clutch field goals by our kickers. Our kicking game has held up. But when the day is done, I think other than the Samford game, this team has just found a way to get the job done, whether it was the defense shutting out or shutting down the other team, offense finding a way. So they just bought into that concept of what does it take to win. It may not be the same thing every week. It may not be 10 on a style look at how pretty it is, but find a way. And like I said, with the exception of the Samford game, which started off very unusual, they've done that week by week.
Is there a game you can kind of point to and say, okay, you knew that this was going to be a special team maybe early in the season, or what would be maybe the most complete game this group has played
I think
so
no
far this
doubt
year?
Chattanooga, Roger. Chattanooga was by far picked by everyone to win the league this year. Now, they had a couple of tough opening opponents, including Tennessee and a loss at Georgia State. So we played them early. That was actually our first conference game, September 14th, but we played well in that game. And I think early in the season, defense only allowed them 3 points. When you're coming off of your opening conference game, when you defeat the team that was picked to win the league, that gives you a tremendous amount of confidence. The defense realized, hey, we might be pretty good. It can stop people. And then from that, it just kind of snowballed from that week by week. What does it take to get the job done today?
It's been good to see. And then offensively, you mentioned some good playmakers. Who are some of the key players our fans should keep an eye out for coming up on Saturday?
Well, of course, I think everyone knows the DJ Smith, who started the season at quarterback, has had injuries twice that has taken him out of games. So Whit Neubauer is a freshman. He's a big kid, 6'6", real strong arm, gets better week by week. Dwayne McGee is a running back who came to Mercer from Lenore-Ryan with Coach Jacobs. He's had an outstanding season. A receiver that interestingly also came from Lenore-Ryan, Keelan Parsons, is our leading receiver. But Braden Smith has been extremely good in all aspects of the game. He's leading the league in all-purpose yardage, an excellent slot receiver, a great punt returner, kick returner. So those are the primary guys offensively. And again, we've had a very good kicking game. Reese Griffith has been clutch for us. Our punter, John McConnell, I think is as good as there is in the FCS. So those are the kind of components on the offensive side of the ball and kicking game.
How about on defense?
Defense is where we knew coming into the season it was going to be a lot of fun. Isaac Dowling, our linebacker, and Ken Stanley, another linebacker, are now the leading tacklers career-wise for Mercer. Braden Manley up front leads the Southern Conference in tackles for losses. The secondary, well, they've been tremendous, Roger. It's hard to believe that in all of the great players in FCS, Mercer has two guys who are tied with 6 interceptions for the season. As a team, Mercer leads the nation in interceptions. But TJ Moore and Miles Redding have been spectacular in the secondary. So that's kind of the top of the ladder, so to speak, of the guys that really have helped us week by week.
What have you enjoyed most about getting to know your head coach, Mike Jacobs, and the approach he's had? And again, great success already at conference champion in year 1.
Well, you know, as announcers, we're always looking, as we interview a coach for any game, we're always looking for that one thing. What's the key to this week's game? Well, with Coach, he kind of after the second week, he kind of looked at me and said, "Rick, run the ball, stop the run. Rick, protect the football, take away the football." So he's a disciplinarian and sticks to the fundamentals, and it's worked. Now he's got great assistant coaches who have provided the specific game plan offensively or defensively. But he's almost reminds me, Roger, of years ago when I was in the National Guard and you go to basic training and you're taught the fundamentals. These are the fundamental things you do. Now, you have the meat and potatoes, you have the dessert later. Well, Mike's a meat and potatoes man and certainly sticks to the structure. And the team bought into that early on. But I have the tremendous respect for Mike, the job he's done. And now having worked with him these 9-10 weeks, I can see why he's won a lot of football games.
And he's hoping to get this team to the playoffs, of course, as the SoCon champions. Alabama's hoping to make it to the college football playoff. Just what could the road ahead look like for Mercer after this?
Well, after this, of course, Furman comes in next week. As you said, the Bears have won outright the championship for our first ever. Now, we just brought football back in 2013, so in 11 years to be looking at a conference championship is amazing for us. Now, we did make the playoffs last year as an at-large and beat Gardner-Webb. Went on to play South Dakota State, who was the reigning national champion and would become the national champion. But this year, again, with a win next week, the Bears win the conference outright. If for some reason Furman were to upset Mercer, the 3 teams that could possibly tie, Mercer has already defeated. So they definitely own the tiebreaker and very excited. They have beaten 4 ranked teams this year. So they got a good resume and they're really excited for the second season. To be in the playoffs and host a first-round game.
Well, every now and then we get to see you in the basketball postseason, either men's or women's. So what can you tell us about the Bears on the hardwood in the start to the season over the past week?
Well, we're off and running. And, you know, it's interesting, Roger. I do play-by-play for 3 teams there at Mercer, football, men's basketball, and a lot of women's basketball. And all 3 have first-year coaches. So getting to know new people, they're getting to know me. Ryan Ritter is the new men's coach, excellent coach. We've played 2 games, just came off the road, a very tough loss at DePaul, which is a very good basketball team. The women's team is led by Michelle Clark-Hurd, who was a former player and coach at Western Kentucky. And interesting, we played those ladies last night. So we're really excited. You know, in the modern day era, it's hard to get a feel for basketball teams with the transfer portal and all, a lot of new players. This year, it's the added factor of having the new head coaches, but we're really excited. They're quality people. In the short time I've known them, I really like them a lot. I think the future is very bright for both men's and women's basketball.
That certainly sounds good. Well, Rick Kaminer, we look forward to having you and the crew in Tuscaloosa this weekend. Just safe travels, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Roger. Always a pleasure.
Don't miss out on your chance to experience the energy and the excitement of the Great American Race. Witness history in the making and purchase your tickets today for the 2025 Daytona 500 at DaytonaInternationalSpeedway.com. Well, it's a busy weekend coming up here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network, really starting tonight with women's basketball. Let's take a look at our upcoming schedule. Later on this evening at 5:45, our radio coverage will start for Alabama against Alcorn State. Thanks to Chris Harris, who will be filling in for me coming up on the Crimson Tide Sports Network with The Call. Coming up tomorrow, there will be a new episode of Tide TV This Week, hosted by Paige Riley. You can watch that on our TV affiliates across the state, as well as RollTide.com. And then men's basketball, I'll be filling in for Chris Stewart along with Brian Passink, coming up at 6 p.m. from Mackey Arena, one of the best environments for college basketball. Our radio coverage will start at 5 o'clock across the network. Then on Saturday, it's all about football. Alabama against Mercer. Kickoff set for 1 p.m. We'll have a radio airtime of 10 a.m. starting outside at Vector Security, Champions Lane. Chris Stewart and Kaylin DeBoer will talk about the game on the Kaylin DeBoer TV show to our TV affiliates across the state on Sunday and later available on demand on RollTide.com. As I mentioned before, Alabama women's basketball will close out the week at 2 p.m. at ULM, ending this week and then starting another busy week coming up of Alabama athletics. Make sure you follow us on all of our social media platforms listed below for the very latest on the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's going to be a busy week coming up, and we're glad you're with us here on the Crimson Tide Sports Network. It's going to wrap up this Thursday edition of Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR. Huge thank you to our guests today, DaShawn Jones, as well as Charlie Potter and Rick Cameron. Thanks to our video producer, Ethan Carabin, put the entire show together for this Thursday afternoon. We appreciate his efforts, and we thank all of you for watching. Now, as we say goodbye on Crimson Drive, driven by NASCAR, we like to close out the show by hearing from the head coach of the Crimson Tide, Kaylin DeBoer, with his final word from last night's edition of Hey Coach and the Kaylin DeBoer Show, as he was joined on stage at Baumhauer's Victory Grill by not just Chris Stewart, but also Alabama's top two running backs, Jam Miller and Justice Haynes. They joined Kaylin DeBoer for the final word from last night's edition of Hey Coach and the Kaylin DeBoer Show. Roll Tide, everyone.
You're only as good as your last game, and the next one is going to be right in front of us here in just a couple days. And these guys, know that we got to continue to take the steps. And as good as last week was, it just is something that we can going to continue to use to learn from, build on, and it does give you some level of confidence, momentum, and these guys right here are a major part of that in a lot of different ways, as we've mentioned. So looking forward to continue to prepare the rest of the week and be ready to go to get after the next opponent, being Mercer, which is a very good football team.
Coach, appreciate you so much. Justice, Jam, really appreciate you guys as well. A lot of fun tonight.
Appreciate you. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Jam Miller, Justice Haynes, and of course, Coach Kaylin DeBoer.